and welcome to Daily Space Weather, folks. Welcome to the live stream if you're on Twitch, or the live premiere if you're on YouTube, or wherever you happen to be. Looking at the north portion of the sun here. In colorized magnetogram, we see a couple of plages and no sunspots. We've looked, and looked closely indeed, although it is some activity, as we've seen a completely blank sun, magnetically and otherwise speaking. Now, we're only looking at about 9.5 hours of activity here on the shortest day of the year. So welcome to Solstice Day. And there's the full colorized magnetogram. The first 9.5 hours of Solstice Day. The day that the sun stops. See a little bit of activity kicking up here right at the pole, too. Check it out. So we'll be looking for crown prominences later. I just wanted to bring up the intensity gram here. The colored intensity gram. Just to show you a big Syracuse orange. With nothing happening. Zero sunspots. A little bit of coronal hole activity, and we'll get into it in a bit. Looking at the LASCO C2, we see a possible coronal mass ejection just in the process of kicking off here on the western limb of the sun. And so that's something to keep an eye on throughout the day. It's not anywhere resembling Earth facing and nothing to worry about. It's just some amusement. Speaking of some amusement, we're going to get into more solar data stuff. But first, let's talk about Fallacies by Twathammer. Yes, Twathammer, the band from Breaking Bad, featuring Badger as the singer, beloved Breaking Bad character Badger. Let me play you a clip. Anyway, it's a good time. There's a lot of hilarious songs associated with the TV show Breaking Bad, which, by the way, is one of my favorites. In fact, I consider Breaking Bad to be the best television show of all time, all things considered. Now, I have a lot of other shows on the list. Leave a comment if you've got an idea for what you think the best show of all time is, whether it's Star Trek The Next Generation, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Magnum P.I., Seinfeld, Trailer Park Boys, or otherwise. Let us know. Are you aware of the Pizza of Destiny? Now, I'm not sure if Gareth is actually Bryan Cranston in disguise or not, with practicing astrophysics and a British accent, but check this scene out. I don't know if you've ever watched the show Breaking Bad, but this is a scene from the Pizza of Destiny, which is an extra with the Breaking Bad DVD set. Here's a clip.
What are the odds? 10 to 1, 1,000 to 1, 1,000,000 to 1, 1,000,000,000 to 1. He landed.
Anyway, he's able to throw the pizza perfectly onto the roof.
It's just one of those.
And allegedly
Look-alike.
it was on the first try. By the way, they had to shop and shop to get that pizza. So check out those videos if you like on YouTube. It's some things about Breaking Bad you may not know. Anyway, back to solar data. Looking at the KP index. It's at 2. It dropped down to 0 for a brief moment there. 3 hours are the intervals of those bars. And we're going to look at the real-time solar wind, I swear, because it's totally going to load. All right, so we're looking at 1 week of the solar wind here for once. And I just wanted to show that entire coronal hole wind stream. You see the density spike at the leading edge of it. And then as the density drops off, the velocity increases. And also there is a heliospheric current sheet polarity crossing in this mix, which happened around here. And yeah, all forecasts came out exactly right this time. And I don't know what's going on with the real-time solar wind data, but it looks like it's crashing my browser. 10.7 centimeter radial flux, by the way, is at 70. So the same as yesterday for that. And yeah, the real-time solar wind has shattered my browser here. I'm hoping it's going to allow me to show you the 1 day. Nope, I think the real-time solar wind is busted. But anyway, that was a 7-day real-time solar wind. The current stats are as follows. Here's the data from ACE, and this is the 1 day data. Solar wind density is still below 10, it's around 5. And solar wind speed still not at super low levels, around 400 kilometers a second there. So, and we do see a small uptick in the X-ray flux, still nothing resembling a B-class flare. Anyway, there's the data from that. There's actually 2 satellites there, long wave and short wave X-ray sensors on both the GOES 16 and 15. So no real X-ray flaring there. And there's the uptick in the electron flux that we forecasted. It's exactly what we forecasted. Good morning, Mary. Thanks for joining the live stream on Twitch. Anyway, there's that uptick in the electron flux that we forecasted, as well as the relativistic electrons. You'll see a small increase in GPS errors around the equator, especially at noon, and sadly around the South Pacific at nighttime. So, welcome to the shortest day of the year, folks. It's December 21st, the solstice, and solstice means the day the sun stops. And in the southern hemisphere, it stops coming south, and in the northern hemisphere, it stops going south. If that makes sense. Anyway, we've got 18 and a half hours until the solstice, and we will be streaming live starting at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. So check us out on Twitch and on YouTube. It's a secret as to where the screen shares will happen, so you have to tune into each. Expecting to have a full camera view on the one site, and hang on a minute. We expect to have a full camera view on one site and a screen share on the other site. You'll have to tune in to figure out which is which, whether it's on Twitch or it's on YouTube. Anyway, look for content to be changing. And anyway, here's 6 hours of the ionosphere. And we see extreme charge ups in the South Pacific at nighttime, right underneath where my pointer is. And we see this stretching all the way into the ground magnetic perturbations. So we see South Pacific pulses happening. And this data courtesy Government of Australia Bureau of Meteorology. And you can see those sudden charge up, discharge scenarios there in the South Pacific. I'll let that stop playing now, and I'll let this start. There's the GOES magnetometer, and we see much higher readings here as the South Pole shows up as a stronger solar pole. So not really very much of a surprise there, considering it's charging up most of the current sheet. And so this uptick in the magnetometer, this is the South Solar Polar Field, and welcome to it. It's the portion that's aligning the plasma. And we do see a small arc jet event there on the GOES 16. No big deal. Levels all in normal ranges there. Here's what we're talking about with the current sheet. This is the Gong 2 data, which is a whole bunch of magnetometers, about 53 of them actually. And this data is 1 hour and 27 minutes old. And this is what we're talking about with the current sheet. Current sheet currently charged up where you are likely located. Let's hope you're located in this area. And please leave a comment if you're viewing the videos from a different plane of existence, spacecraft, solar system, time frame, yada, yada, yada. leave a comment if you're able. Please don't do it in Morse code, as that's a lot of translation. Anyway, not a lot of activity on the sun there, but that's the current charge pattern of the current sheet. And we do see a little bit of jumping around, and that's associated with that plage region that we see north of the equator in the eastern portion of the solar disk. Next, we'll look at the magnetosphere movies. And you can see the vast difference in the angle of the magnetotail on the equatorial plane. That's the result of the current sheet polarity shift. Yes, current sheet polarity shift. And we're frozen. We are frozen, folks. Move on to the geospace ground magnetic perturbations here. By the way, we have set up a delay on purpose. We have a 5-second delay, I believe it is, set up here on our software on purpose. And that is, I believe, part of the contributor to the slightly better frame rate. So we're tweaking settings, folks. Here are the ground magnetic perturbations. We're going to go back to the magnetosphere pressure animation in a minute here. I would note that there are significant magnetic perturbations coming straight out of the Pacific Ocean, northwest of where we see those ionosphere anomalies. And let's see if we can get this thing to play. There we go. I would note that the equatorial plane magnetotail there is less skewed than it was a couple of days ago when we were in the North Pole oriented portion of the current sheet. And we'll let the ground magnetic perturbations play a second time here. Anyway, these magnetosphere movies do not like playing through, so we'll just continue on here. Welcome to the polar excursion, the solar minimum, yada, yada, yada. A 6.1 magnitude earthquake struck Jam, Afghanistan yesterday, killing at least one. Now, it's not a super populated area there, and we'll leave links to the article from Independent after the live stream's complete. These areas are not typically well built in terms of earthquake resilience. Here's where it's located. Near Tajikistan, I believe some damage may have happened in, Tajikistan. I thought I heard something hit India too a little bit, but looks like some small tremors did happen in India as well. Happened in a mountainous region, it looks like. Probably not all that populated, but we've been seeing deep quakes there for a long time, so not a huge surprise. And let's look at the last 24. There's a deep quake at East Timor, a deep quake at Wallace and Futuna. Looks like a snowman, folks. Check it out. We got an earthquake snowman. And let's continue up the list here. Oh man, that 6.1 magnitude quake was at a depth of 210 kilometers, which means I would stay on alert there. Jeez. I didn't realize it was a 210 kilometer deep quake. That's not a good sign, folks. If that happened at the surface, that would be a 7+ magnitude. Right around a 7 magnitude. Here's a shallow quake, and when I say shallow, I mean 1,600 meters above sea level. So we've seen an increase in the alert level at Mauna Loa, actually, and here's a quake right underneath Mauna Loa once again. So we see obvious magma chamber activity here, and this one looks like it is at the spot just underneath the caldera practically at 1,300 meters. And for those of you who don't understand what I'm saying here, when I say 1,300 meters, I mean, I'm sorry, 1,600 meters. 1,600 meters above sea level at a depth of negative 1.6 kilometers. So earthquake uptick and deep earthquake uptick, folks. Here's another deep quake at Afghanistan, an aftershock of that deep 6.1. Here's a deep quake at Alaska out in the Aleutians. I'll tell you what, as far as the Earth's infrastructure goes, we just need one major volcanic eruption, and you won't like the way the world looks in a couple of months. So that's the only 6+ magnitude quake. There's another deep quake near Alaska, a deep quake near Tonga. So it's a deep quake event once again, folks. An indication that more quakes are coming. We'll be keeping an eye on the sun for coronal holes. Shout out to Kimberly and Australia as we see some horrific things going on. Check out the carbon monoxide content. We do have some webcams here. I don't know if I'll be able to, if it's going to show a fire or not. Here's Sydney. Let's take a look at Sydney. I think it's smoky in Sydney, folks. That is a pretty intense fire, likely right there. I'm not going to bring up the active fires map as it's a little funky. Let's switch to the pressure and show the viewers the pressure maps. For those of you real nerds who understand the atmospheric physics. When quakes happen 1.6 meters, 1.6 kilometers above sea level, that means they're on a mountain. So this mountain is the foothills of Mauna Loa, a giant, like 10,000 foot high volcano. Anyway, there are the pressure zones currently. And by the way, it's 5:02 a.m. Eastern time. Which is 1000 Universal Time. 10 a.m. UT, Greenwich Mean Time. We're advancing the pressure map here via the GFS forecast, I believe it is. And there's where things will be at 1300 Universal tomorrow. Allegedly, let's just make sure we're in the right thing here. And we are indeed in the Euro forecast. There's the difference in the GFS forecast, which is minimal. All right, let's move on to more data as there's still lots of stuff to cover. Hoping Australia gets things squared away and gets a bunch of rain. As I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they set their highest temperature ever recorded there? No, I don't think it's because of carbon dioxide, if you're wondering. Volcano rundown includes Mount Aso. Don't fly over it, period, but the flight level is 6,000. Flight level 5,000 over Sakurajima as it has exploded. Dakono exploding, 7,000 foot plume there. Fuego, volcanic ash not detected in satellite. And Sabancaya exploding, producing a 27,000 foot ash plume. Please don't fly your John Denver style ultralight over Sabancaya, as it will not be a high times for you. It won't be a Rocky Mountain high. It'll be a flaming landing low. U.S. Doppler radar map showing a bunch of heavy storms over the southern Gulf Coast as well as Washington and Oregon coasts. Otherwise fairly clear, as we've got a bunch of dry air in the center of the country. Here's the lightning scenario. And man, oh man, Australia, chill out. Chill out, Australia. You don't need more fires sparked by lightning. But the lightning's coming anyway. Shout out to the Northern Territory, where I don't think anybody lives. Here's a U.S. water vapor map. And you can see this area of dry air here is kind of holding everything back. And there's an atmospheric river forming as a lot of moisture is kind of just building up here as the jet stream backwashes it. And everything else is reflecting off of this dry air here. It's just a little more massive. It looks like a ghost over Oklahoma. Check it out. It looks like the marshmallow ghost from Boo Berry cereal. And that is an interesting area, to say the least. If you're in Central Texas, welcome to the protons! You're getting lots of protons there. Yes, I want to build a primer cube too. I just got to buy thousands of dollars worth of 3D printing equipment, magnets, and all kinds of other circuitry and things to put together and build one. It's not a vast undertaking or anything. Oh, man. And thanks, everybody, for leaving comments. All of you viewing on YouTube, the reason I'm looking down is because I'm viewing the comments, so cheers. By the way, if you've got cash to spend before the end of the year, do you have cash to spend at the end of fiscal year? Maybe buy a bike, or maybe donate to us via Patreon, perhaps. Become a patron. Become a gold level patron. Smash team. Support the operation and see things behind the scenes and get free audio and all kinds of other media and information before anybody else. No, we're not trying to hide information itself, as that's evil. And by the way, a little background. The way we look for coronal mass ejections facing the Earth is to go to the ISWA page, the Integrated Space Weather Analysis, and then bring up the page 7 Stereo 2 coronagraph. And then we look at the animation of that. And if we see stuff coming out facing this direction, we look at the LASCO C2. And you see right there, we don't see any kind of coronal mass ejections facing the Earth. I think there might be one on the opposite side of where stereo A is located. And so if you want to see that, keep an eye on the LASCO C2 and or C3, which is what we showed earlier in the video. Now, let's move on to that is censored, and that is a sinkhole, where we talk about whatever we want. And first thing I'm talking about is Cygnus X3, which is this bright X-ray source right here, which has two relativistic jets. One, which is this blue one here, is pointed right at you. You're looking right down the barrel of this thing's poloidal Z field. The red jet is the one pointed away from you. And it appears that there may be a star forming inside of that condensed portion of that dust, gas, whatever it happens to be. shown in red on the X3 image. And I just wanted to bring that up as it's one of the most likely point sources for cosmic ray flux. And it's located at a significantly far distance compared to other stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up as during the That Is an Ass and That Is a Hole section, I just talk about whatever I want. And if it happens to be politics, well then, too bad. It doesn't really happen very much, but it does occasionally occur. So, by the way, follow us also on other social media like BitChute and Gab and Minds.com, and we're even on Twitter, believe it or not. Especially get on things like BitChute and Minds because we need alternatives to the monopoly power of certain companies. Certain companies that aren't particularly great companies. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but I've gotten back into gaming. Looks like I'm ranked in the top 1,500 on skill. On Enemy Territory, which is it's a Quake 3 engine open source free game, online, basically online only. I mean, I guess you could play it by yourself, but nobody really does. It's got an active community, and it's only about a 300 megabyte game. Doesn't require a fast PC, so maybe check that out and come and find $F hashtag smash space O apostrophe mash, and I always play as that. And don't forget to follow us on Twitch and become a patron, as there's going to be all kinds of things like game servers and all kinds of other stuff that you may not be expecting.
Welcome to a live stream.
So we wanted to place an announcement to YouTube viewers, and so now we'll place it to Twitch viewers also, as I'm sure there's probably somebody on Twitch who refuses to access a Google server. Let me just play the video. It's a live stream from this morning.
Welcome to a live stream, viewers. We are returning things to a similar format to how they were at the point when Google decided to remove software. So as you can see, we've got a pop-out chat now once again, and we're not going to be changing the format right away. We're still planning to do the space weather videos the same way we've been doing them, where we stream live to Twitch, and then we put a pre-recorded video onto YouTube, and we watch the premiere live with our YouTube viewers. Look for additional exclusive content coming out soon, as we are going to be not just streaming to Twitch, but also streaming to YouTube, as well as to Facebook. So don't forget to join us tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern Time for our Solstice stream, and look for a space weather video coming out in about an hour, as well as a whole bunch of additional content. So thanks to everybody who views the content.
Anyway, more on that later. And when I say moron, the pun is incidental. By the way, follow us also on Instagram, where we'll put up analysis that's exclusive, where we may never talk about it. Let me just talk about an explanation for the disappearing large objects. Now, mainstream astronomy thinks stars die. And let me just read one of my comments. By the way, this is from Gareth's video on See the Pattern. So perhaps go see the pattern on YouTube. Nova shells would explain this, considering a spherical shell of cold plasma could block the spectra and fields, as well as explaining the flaring events before the disappearance. Now, these disappearing objects seem to flare up just before they vanished, which supports all kinds of different theories. And you'll see this all over the science wires today and yesterday and the day before. The disappearing object photographed in the 50s, which more recently does not appear on the plates. So I shouldn't say plates, I should say images. Anyway, whenever we see the deaths of stars, events commonly referred to as supernova, more and more often we find the remnant shell illuminated from the center. And that's because stars don't die, at least not the way mainstream astronomy thinks that they do, and or their death isn't an exploding object. And more importantly, these things don't collapse on themselves, as condensed matter can't collapse. And it certainly can't do work on itself. So anyway, regarding the electric universe theory of what's going on, just to kind of say the same thing in a slightly different terminology, what do you think about the idea that the star wobbles back and forth through the filament in which it travels, receives repulsive forces from the environment? For proton beams will repel proton beams, and attractive forces as well, depending on its proximity to denser ionized dust versus less ionized dust. The mechanism would be electrons chase the proton streams around space. In other words, ultimately, electron affinity versus availability is a plausible driver for the way all the stuff works down to the most basic level here. We're trying to simplify things for cosmology to create cosmic models that actually make sense and support observations instead of taking math equations and trying to find observations to support those. Now, you'll see other stuff completely unrelated also on Instagram. And there's a reason why we put exclusive content everywhere, obviously. Hopefully we won't have any of our social media platforms deleted, but we also took a walk on the Appalachian Trail yesterday, and it was
It's
a bit
little on the cool side.
on the cool
on
side.
The Appalachian Trail today.
So perhaps you'll see other stuff like that. You got to have it. Now this one, I left this on the, for some reason I'm on Reuters India again. Were you aware that the U.S. Department of Agriculture was apparently trading with Wakanda, the fictional plane of existence portrayed in the 2018 Marvel Comics release Black Panther? I'm not kidding. Anyway, Wakanda's been removed from the trade list. Let's hope that there's a trading embargo and we've placed stringent sanctions on Wakanda, because I think all of the trading of live animals, dairy goods, tobacco, and alcohol must have ceased. So take that, Wakanda. In your face, Wakanda. U.S. ain't trading with you anymore. And we covered this one yesterday too, and I'm leaving it in again because Pornhub has exposed Android version stats that Google won't. Are you wondering who's using what operating systems, folks? I know I always do, as there's so much junkware out there you can't even wade through it with hip waders. You got to have chest waders to wade through the junkware. Traffic by mobile OS version. Anyway, here's Pornhub's results. And keep in mind, a very, very, very large percentage of internet traffic goes through pornography sites. So, the most common version of Android is Pi, where nearly half of users are using Pi at least to search Pornhub. And of Apple users, iOS 13 is used by 71%. Probably because these companies plan obsolescence into their hardware and their software. But in any case, we'll link to this article once again today so Yaz can read about Yaz thing. Shout out to Chris, who's created an Evripedia article. And thanks for taking the time to do that. That must have been quite a bit of work. So cheers. We'll leave links to that also. I was not familiar with Evripedia until yesterday. And I'll be searching through there, as it's always interesting to see new websites. Speaking of new websites, ever see smAsho.org? Well, in any case, welcome to the Neo Renaissance. As things like physics get rewritten, and we report on it, on the regs. And when I say the regs, I mean hundreds and hundreds of days in a row without missing a single day. Check us out on Facebook also. I guess I was posting something. And yeah, we're on Facebook, facebook.com/smAshomash, twitter.com/smAshomash, gab.com/smAshomash, youtube.com/smAshomash, twitch.tv/smAshomash. Let's talk about New Year's resolutions. We've left links to a science-related article about how to keep yours. And most people don't. Anyway, don't be so hard on yourselves. Read the article, and let's talk about the distinction between your ass and a hole in the ground. Big tech. You can't break the internet, but the internet can break you. Were you aware that I'm not a huge fan of certain organizations? I mean, if you watch the channel regularly, you're probably aware that I have beef with certain entities because they do very shady things. Were you aware that Sundar Pichai has received the largest stock payout ever or something? It's the largest ever stock award, again, awarded by Alphabet. Now, Sundar Pichai is completely in charge of Alphabet/Google now, as Sergey Brin and Larry Page have stepped down. And when I say stepped down, I mean they still control over 52% of the company's capital stock, which means they still run the board, which means they've installed this guy and paid him a lot of money to, I guess, accept all the liability that Alphabet/Google has created for itself. And let's just say, if I were misleading the shareholders, I wouldn't be accepting such a ridiculous position. Now, Pichai came to fame by fixing up Google Chrome. So Google Chrome, most people on the internet, I believe, still use Google Chrome. A horrific piece of junkware browser. And he's getting paid $250 million now over the period of the next couple years. Let's talk about Geminga, as Geminga is super interesting, as this pulsar is showing us the way things operate on a larger scale here. Now, what you're seeing is a gamma ray bubble, which is full of gamma rays and X-rays at certain wavelengths, but not other wavelengths, or you could say certain energy levels. And what's interesting about this is that in the magnetotail of Geminga, there is a massive star-forming region. Essentially, this pulsar is forming a small galaxy in its magnetotail. There are going to be a bunch of stars forming in there, we would expect, and it's not going to be something you're going to be able to watch, but since it takes place over a very long period of time. Now, if you want to look at the transient X-ray bursts from Geminga, just head to the Neil Gorell Swift Bat X-ray Observatory and just hit something like Control F, right, and type in Geminga, and you can follow it. Or if you want to watch Crab, you can watch Crab. Don't type in Carb though. You just type in Crab, and then when you see one that's actually on the list right there, you can watch Crab, or you can watch Vela. You want to watch Vela, the Vela pulsar? Oh, there's that one too. The Neil Gorell Swift X-ray Observatory. Let's actually look one up. One that we looked at a little earlier, Cygnus X3. Let's check the transients there. It's a fairly accepted cosmic ray source, by the way, folks. And if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, it's more than likely that Cygnus X3 has been sending protons through your head throughout your entire life. And speaking of sending things through your head, let's do a segment that we've been failing to do. It's the in-sky-org section, where I look at a sky map of what's going on above my head. If you're wondering why that happened, it's because I lost my tabs. I can only cover important things so many times for so many days in a row before I forget something. So in any case, there's what's going on above my head. Mars still rising, trailing the moon. It's probably a great sky out there if you've got, for instance, an east-facing ocean view at sunrise. We're going to see a cosmic pileup, as we typically have been, as you see the moon, and then Mars, and then Mercury, and then the sun. I guess it doesn't get attacked. Then Jupiter, then Saturn, and Venus, all in a line, all in the sky, on the shortest day of the year. By the way, if you're wondering where the planets are, head to The Planets Today. That's theplanetstoday.com. And that's where stuff is. And that's where stuff will be in a week, as the Earth is completely on the opposite side of the sun regarding everything else in the whole solar system. It's getting lonely on Earth right now, folks. By the way, if you're wondering where Geminga is, it's way out here to the right of Milky Way's center, depending on which orientation you're looking at. By the way, if you want to read about an interesting object, check out Blazar 3C454.3. One of the brightest individual objects, a blazar, one of the brightest objects ever measured. Blazar 3C454.3. Now here's a close-up of Geminga, and I just wanted to revisit this because this artist rendition is showing a very interesting thing here, and this is a fairly accurate, I believe, idea of what's going on. Now, you see these lines coming out of the poles. Those would be the poloidal Z fields. You see the way they're getting pinned back? One of the theories as to how these things do this is they behave like fountains. In other words, whatever kind of a stream of energy is causing this to do this and be so lopsided, where it only has one lobe, whatever's causing it to do that, such as a very strong electron beam, perhaps, very strong proton beam, one or the other, or both, most likely both, whatever's causing it to do that is going to cause these proton beams, which come out of the intrinsic object, to get pinned back like this. How much of this rains back down into its own magnetotail could be some sort of a formula as to how star-forming regions happen. So when we start looking at distant objects, folks, one of the problems that we get is perspective, as it's very difficult to zoom in on the full scheme. You got to view these things in all kinds of different wavelengths to get any indication of what the three-dimensional structure looks like. So the artist's renditions here are actually quite helpful, but it is a fairly sound theory that these long streamers are coming out of the poloidal fields. Anyway, let's move on to talk about the shortest day of the year. So please tune in later. We may make a second or third video before we make the live stream tonight. Again, we're going from 11 to midnight Eastern Time. Now, the solstice is a day long on traditions, as there's all kinds of megalithic areas that are built to do stuff like measure the solstice. It's falling actually on the 22nd in Tokyo, as well as Dubai. But it's at 11:19 in Philadelphia. I'll be about 50 miles north of there in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. So again, please join us. Now, the word solstice, it means the stopping of the sun. In other words, each day at noon, the sun is lower and lower in the sky if you're in the north. And then on the solstice, it stops and it starts moving back north again, making for the darkest day of the year. We put links to all the articles in there. Let's move on to more value-added services. Were you aware of the Rabbi axe thrower who's been holding classes? Shout out to Conan, Team Coco. Holla Team Coco for informing us of this one. Apparently, after that Jersey City shooting a few days ago, folks in Jersey flocked to axe throwing because it's very difficult to deal with New Jersey gun laws. And this is where it leads, folks. This is where it leads. It leads to axe throwing, machete throwing, hammer throwing, and other ridiculous things, when in most normal states you could just buy a gun, as per capita crime is much lower in places like Pennsylvania than places like Maryland, where it's nearly impossible to own a gun. You don't even want to drive through certain states with any sort of ammunition or anything if you can help it, because certain states you could go to jail for an extended period of time with no priors just by having a hollow point ammunition, one round of hollow point, or one high capacity magazine holding more than 10 rounds, and all kinds of stuff like that. So remember, folks, ignorance is not an excuse, legally speaking. And again, shout out to Team Coco. We accept cookies all day from Team Coco. Conan O'Brien, just hilarious. And thanks for tuning in, Smash Team, to the Smash stream or the live premiere or in syndication or whichever commercials you were forced to watch to tune into this. Holla. And don't forget to tune into the Solstice stream, where we'll be live from 11 p.m. until midnight. Watch us instead of SNL, DVR SNL, fast forward all the commercials. You really want to watch the sponsors of Saturday Night Live? Seriously? Check out the bonus feature. It's the local yellow dwarf in 335 angstroms. Things to keep an eye on would be that active region there, northeast of the equator. By the way, folks, for you new viewers out there, and thanks, new subscribers, to new viewers out there, the reason we call this the east is because this is where the weather rises from. This is the rise of the solar weather. That's why we call this the east. And this is called the west because this is where things set. The reason we call this spacecraft stereo B is because it's viewing space weather behind us. This is called stereo A because it's receiving space weather ahead of our view. That's why the east is the east, and the west is the west, and the behind is the behind, and the ahead is the ahead. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We are out. I got to get this thing into syndicated format. So I'll see you later tonight, possibly even later this afternoon. Remember, stare at the sun, don't drink, and if you drink, don't drive. Seriously, don't drive. And since it'll never be now again, may that solar wind be at your back, and that atherosclerosis absent from your veins.